In the Cotswolds, where the rolling hills wore their age like weathered crowns, and the air always seemed tinged with old secrets, the Pendelton Stud farm looked as if it had grown from the very soil. But beneath the postcard beauty, time was gnawing at its roots. Arthur Pendelton could feel it every time he crossed the yard, boots sinking in mud that hadn't quite forgotten the last rain. That morning, he knelt beside a fence post at the edge of the property, hands rough from decades of work, trying to drive a splintered stake back into the ground. The wood crumbled under the weight of his hammer, sending flakes tumbling. He stared at the rotten core, the fibers eaten out, the surface flaking away with every touch. This isn't just a fence post, he thought. It's my whole damn legacy. He wiped his brow, glancing back at the stables, where the once proud name of Pendelton Stud was carved into a wooden sign so faded you'd have to squint to read it. He could hear the distant nickering of horses and the clang of metal from the barn. For a second, he closed his eyes and remembered how this place had once buzzed with life. The pastures full, the foals prancing in the dew. Now, too many stalls stood empty, and even the morning light felt thin, tired. A voice called from the porch, soft but insistent, and he turned to see his daughter Isla clutching her phone and an envelope. Her face was drawn tight, eyes rimmed red. Arthur's stomach dropped before she spoke, the way a man knows a storm's coming before the thunder hits. "Dad, it's Rosie," she said. "We need to go, now." Rosie was the last real hope for Pendelton Stud, a prize mare with lineage you could trace back 100 years. Her unborn foal was supposed to turn things around, bring buyers, put the Pendelton name back in the winner's circle. But Isla didn't have to explain. Arthur could read the panic in her voice. He tossed the hammer aside, wiping his hands on his jeans, and followed her to the truck, the fence forgotten. The drive to the veterinary clinic cut through fields of wildflowers and hedgerows drooping with age. Neither spoke. Arthur's mind spun with numbers, unpaid bills, lines of credit, debts that never seemed to shrink. But none of it mattered if they lost Rosie. At the clinic, the air was cold and too clean, the fluorescent lights making everything feel flat and unreal. Dr. Davies, the vet, met them at the door, face pinched, eyes shifting between them and his chart. He led them down the hall, boots squeaking on the linoleum. In the exam room, Rosie stood trembling, her great belly quivering with every breath. The ultrasound machine hummed as Dr. Davies worked, Isla hovering at his side, clutching a tablet full of research and statistics. Arthur tried to read their faces, Isla's jaw clenched, the doctor's frown deepening. Then Davies spoke, his voice clinical, each word a nail in the coffin. "It's twins. 1 in 10,000 chance," he said, low. "The risks are enormous. If you want to save Rosie and have a shot at saving the foals, I recommend terminating one. It's the only way to minimize loss." Arthur flinched as if struck. The words echoed, minimize loss, like this was all just another item on a spreadsheet. Isla stiffened, her whole body bracing against the verdict. "Wait," she said, her voice steady but thin. "There has to be another way. Let me show you what I've found." She slid her tablet across the table, pulling up studies, graphs, a whole world of numbers and probabilities. Arthur's head swam. He wasn't a scientist, but he saw the hope burning in her eyes. Still, the weight of years, of failure, of scraping by, bore down on him. He looked at Dr. Davies, hoping for a miracle. But the man only shook his head, sympathy and exhaustion mixing on his face. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Arthur remembered the way his father used to stand in this same spot, years ago, talking about bloodlines and destiny, the family's future written in horses and hard work. Now, the world had changed, and Arthur was just trying to hold on to a legacy that felt more like a curse. Isla's voice broke through his thoughts, clear and fierce. "This isn't the end," she said, her hands trembling just slightly. "This is where our fight begins." For a moment, something like hope flickered in the room. Arthur looked at his daughter, saw not the little girl who used to chase foals in the pasture, but a woman who'd fought her way through college, who believed in science and second chances. The doctor hesitated, then sighed. "It's your call, Mr. Pendelton." Arthur stared at Rosie, at her sweat-darkened coat, her liquid eyes full of pain and trust. He saw the broken fence post in his mind, the farm crumbling, his name about to vanish into dust. But he also saw Isla, stubborn, brilliant, unwilling to quit. He drew a slow breath. "All right," he said. "Let's do it Isla's way." Outside, the sun dipped behind the clouds, and a cold wind swept the Cotswold hills. Arthur clenched his fists, feeling the pressure of time and failure pressing in from all sides. But as Isla smiled, tired, triumphant, he realized something had shifted. They weren't beaten yet. The fight for Pendelton Stud had just begun. In the old stone farmhouse, where every floorboard seemed to remember 100 footsteps before, morning light crept through the curtains, casting long shadows across the living room. Arthur sat at the heavy oak table, a mug of cold coffee forgotten in his hands, staring at a ledger filled with angry red numbers. Bills, vet fees, feed costs. The sums never added up, no matter how many times he tried. The house was silent except for the ticking of an ancient clock and the distant, muffled sound of horses outside. The room felt different this morning. Heavier, more tense. As Isla moved briskly around, arms loaded with thick research binders, folders of medical studies, and her ever-present tablet, she dropped everything onto the table with a thud, scattering a pile of envelopes. Arthur's pen slipped, leaving a ragged mark across the page. "Dad," Isla said, her tone somewhere between apology and determination. "I know what Dr. Davies said last night sounds impossible, but I'm not going to just sit here and let them—" She caught herself, breathing out slowly, then started over. "There are documented protocols for managing high-risk twin pregnancies in horses. They're rare, but they exist. I have the studies." Arthur didn't answer, not right away. He watched her lay out charts and spreadsheets, her hands shaking just a little, but her eyes bright with stubborn fire. In the old days, he would have snapped, would have told her that science and numbers were fine for people who didn't have to live with the consequences. But Isla wasn't just anyone. She was his only child, the last branch of the Pendelton family tree. Liam stood in the doorway, a faded baseball cap in his hands, his boots leaving muddy prints on the old rug. He was younger than Arthur by a good 20 years, but the lines around his eyes made him look older, especially after last night. He watched Isla with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You really think this'll work?" Liam asked, not quite meeting Isla's eyes. "I think," Isla said, gathering her notes, "that it's worth trying. We have nothing left to lose, do we?" Arthur grunted, not looking up. He felt caught between worlds, the way things had always been and the way things were becoming. He wanted to believe his daughter, wanted to believe that hard work and heart could still win out against the odds, but the voice in his head, the voice of his own father, whispered that farms weren't saved by wishful thinking. Isla pointed to a color-coded chart, the lines spiking and falling in precise little waves. The numbers, the probabilities, the scientific rigor, all of it felt foreign to Arthur, who measured success by the heft of a foal's leg, the shine on a mare's coat. "Here," Isla said, tracing the graph. "This protocol's been used in Germany, Ireland, even Kentucky. If we stabilize Rosie and provide supplemental nutrition, keep her stress low, monitor the fetuses daily. There's a chance, Dad. It's not zero. I'll do the monitoring myself." Liam snorted quietly, but his skepticism softened as Isla spoke. He had grown up on farms, too, and he'd seen what desperation looked like. He knew how hope could turn to bitterness when reality crashed in. But Isla was different. Not just book-smart, but tough. The kind of person who didn't blink when the world pushed back. Arthur ran a hand through his graying hair, eyes flicking from Isla to the window. Outside, the mist clung to the ground, turning the fields ghostly. "Even if it works," he said, voice gravelly, "we can't afford a single mistake. If Rosie goes down—" Isla's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't back down. "I know the risks, Dad, but I also know what'll happen if we do nothing. You taught me to fight for what matters. I'm fighting. For her. For us." The silence stretched. Liam looked away, staring at the horses grazing in the field. Arthur drummed his fingers on the table. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The kind that didn't let you sleep. The kind that made your heart heavy every time you looked at the land you'd inherited, and wondered if you were the one who'd let it slip away. Finally, Arthur spoke, each word slow and careful. "You're sure about this, Isla?" "I am," she said. "Let me try, Dad, please." For a long moment, no one moved. Liam cleared his throat, glancing between them, unsure if he was supposed to speak or leave. Arthur saw the concern in Liam's eyes, not just for Rosie, but for the farm, for all of them. "All right," Arthur said, the word heavy as an iron gate swinging open. "We'll do it your way." Isla exhaled shakily, relief flickering in her smile. "Thank you, Dad. I won't let you down." Liam shifted his weight again, then gave a small nod. "If you need help, just say the word." Outside, a thin rain began to tap against the windows. Isla quickly started gathering supplies. Saline bags, syringes, her laptop full of research. Arthur watched her, feeling a strange mix of pride and fear. He remembered his wife, gone these 10 years now, her laughter echoing through these rooms. She would have loved Isla's fire, her refusal to surrender. Maybe that was what the farm needed. Not another man stubbornly clinging to the past, but someone brave enough to risk everything for the future. They moved to the kitchen, where Isla lined up her charts and started a checklist. Liam filled buckets with fresh water, his skepticism slowly morphing into a kind of cautious trust. Arthur leaned against the counter, arms folded. "What do you need from us?" he asked. "Help me set up a monitoring station in the barn," Isla said, voice steadier now. "I'll need someone to help Rosie stay calm during the ultrasounds. She trusts you, Dad, and Liam's good with her too. And if either of you notice anything at all, let me know immediately." Arthur nodded. He'd spent his life reading horses, sensing their moods in the twitch of an ear or the flick of a tail. If Isla needed vigilance, he would give her everything he had left. Liam went to the tack room, returning with a handful of clean towels, while Arthur fetched an old radio and set it to a station playing soft, classical music. The barn, usually chilly and dim, began to feel almost hopeful as Isla set up her equipment, taping charts to the wall, connecting her laptop to a portable monitor. By afternoon, Rosie stood quietly in her stall, her flanks heaving but her eyes calm, soothed by Arthur's gentle voice and Liam's steady hands. Isla worked quickly but methodically, her every movement calculated, each procedure double-checked. As evening fell, the family gathered in the barn. Isla carefully inserted an IV line, monitoring Rosie's vitals, taking notes. Liam watched every move, still wary, but unable to hide his admiration as Isla worked. Arthur held Rosie's halter, whispering softly to her, memories swirling of past champions, of victories and heartbreak. The hours passed. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the barn roof. Inside, Isla watched the monitor, noting every tiny fluctuation, every beat of the twin hearts flickering across the screen. No one spoke much, but in the quiet, something shifted. Old wounds softened, doubts faded. For the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel like a lie. As midnight approached, Isla finished her final check, exhausted but satisfied. She turned to Arthur and Liam. "We made it through the first day," she said, a tired smile breaking through. "It's a start." Arthur squeezed her shoulder, pride warming his eyes. Liam gave a quiet, genuine grin. And outside, in the cold, wet dark, the old farmhouse seemed to stand just a little taller, as if it too sensed the battle had begun. The stone walls of the Pendelton Stud stables had seen generations come and go, their rough surfaces patched and worn, layered with stories no one bothered to write down. But on this particular morning, those same walls looked transformed, almost out of place in the 21st century, as Isla set about turning the stable into a makeshift laboratory. Cables snaked across the straw-strewn floor, connecting heart rate monitors and a small bank of medical equipment borrowed from the local veterinary college. Screens glowed a cold blue, tracing Rosie's vital signs in real time. The scent of antiseptic battled with the earthy smell of hay and horses, an odd blend that made Arthur's nose wrinkle every time he stepped in. He leaned on the stall door, arms crossed, watching Isla work. She moved with sharp purpose, slipping latex gloves on and off, checking and rechecking the setup. Rosie, exhausted but trusting, stood quietly in her stall, her great flanks rising and falling as she watched her people with enormous, liquid eyes. Liam hovered awkwardly in the corner, boots shuffling, hands jammed into his jacket pockets. He watched Isla, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of science unfolding before him. "You ever do anything like this before?" he asked, nodding toward the screens. Isla didn't look up. "Not with horses," she said. "Only with sheep, a few goats. But the principle's the same. Monitor, adjust, intervene only when necessary." Arthur let out a short, low whistle. He felt like a tourist in his own barn, out of step with the new world his daughter had dragged in. Part of him wanted to object, to call the whole thing off and rely on instinct, on the old ways. But the other part, the part that remembered the fear in Isla's voice, stayed silent. The morning ticked by, 1 hour at a time. Isla recorded vitals every 30 minutes, entering numbers into her laptop. Rosie seemed calmer with Arthur around, so he stayed, murmuring nonsense, stroking her nose. Liam fetched bales of straw, spread clean bedding, and tried not to knock over any of the equipment. Every so often he'd pause to watch the lines and numbers flickering on the screens. It looked like something out of a hospital, not a farm. Just before noon, Isla called them over. On the ultrasound monitor, 2 faint heartbeats pulsed, one strong, one flickering a bit weaker. "This one's not keeping pace," Isla said quietly, pointing to the fainter pulse. "We'll need to up the nutritional support. Add a supplement to Rosie's IV. Liam frowned. You think that'll work? It has to, Isla replied. I won't lose either if I can help it. She checked the IV, adjusted the flow, then went to type up notes for Dr. Davies. Arthur watched her, pride mixing with worry. She was fighting for this farm in ways he never imagined, not with fists or stubbornness, but with pure intellect and determination. The hours blurred into each other, a rhythm of checks, adjustments, and careful observation. Rain pattered on the tin roof, the sound soothing and constant. Mid-afternoon, as Isla double-checked Rosie's heart rate, a loud engine noise shattered the peace. Liam peeked through the barn doors, eyebrows drawn tight. Somebody's coming, he muttered. Big bike by the sound of it. Arthur's spine stiffened. Visitors were rare these days, and rarely good news. He slipped out, boots crunching on gravel. Isla hesitated, worry flitting across her face. A battered motorcycle screeched to a halt outside, its tires sending muddy spray across the drive. The rider, a courier in a battered leather jacket, hopped off, clutching a package. He waved a clipboard at Arthur. Special delivery, Mr. Pendelton, he said, rain dripping from his helmet. Signed for urgent. Arthur signed, taking the box. The courier gave a stiff nod, then gunned the engine and sped away, the noise echoing long after he was gone. Arthur opened the package, hands trembling. Inside was a padded envelope from the Veterinary Supply Company. Isla's specialized supplements and new ultrasound probes had finally arrived. He let out a long breath. Maybe luck was changing, just a little. He hurried back inside, where Isla opened the box, her relief obvious. She immediately went to work, prepping the new supplements, setting up the improved probes, explaining to Arthur and Liam each step as she moved. With the new equipment, Isla was able to get an even clearer read on Rosie's twins. The heartbeats pulsed on the screen, the stronger one steady, the weaker flickering, but still present. All we can do now is keep them stable and watch for any signs of distress, Isla said, rubbing her tired eyes. Arthur put a hand on her shoulder. You're doing all right, kid, he said, voice rough. Your mom would be proud. Isla blinked, swallowing hard. Thanks, Dad, she said. Even Liam, normally so reserved, offered a quiet, good job, Doc. By late afternoon, hope was creeping in. Rosie responded well to the supplements. Her breathing eased. Her eyes seemed brighter. Isla allowed herself a tentative smile as she checked her notes. But just as the sun began to dip, a sudden sharp sound echoed through the barn. A metallic clang, followed by a low, panicked whinny. Isla spun around. Rosie's legs trembled, her head swinging as she staggered in her stall. Alarms on the monitors blared, a piercing, urgent sound. Arthur was at Rosie's side in 2 strides. Hold her steady! Isla snapped, racing to adjust the IV and slap a sensor back in place. Liam ran for the emergency kit, hands shaking. Rosie's entire body shook, sweat breaking out along her neck and flanks. Come on, girl. Come on, Arthur whispered, gripping Rosie's halter, his own heart pounding. Isla checked the readings, her face paling. One of the heartbeats was stuttering, the line on the monitor jagged and weak. Liam returned with a tube of glucose gel, Isla quickly applying it, massaging Rosie's gums, counting the seconds under her breath. For a few awful moments, the only sounds were the alarms, Rosie's labored breathing, and Isla's frantic instructions. Then, slowly, Rosie steadied. The alarms quieted. Both heartbeats flickered back into a fragile rhythm. Arthur slumped against the wall, shaking. Isla took a deep breath, staring at the screen, relief and fear warring on her face. "That was close," she whispered. "Too close." The barn was silent now, heavy with the awareness that the battle had just begun. Liam leaned against a stall door, wiping his forehead. "You sure you know what you're doing?" he asked, voice hoarse but gentler than before. Isla straightened, looking from Liam to Arthur. "I know I can't promise a miracle," she said, "but I promise I won't quit. Not now." Arthur reached out, squeezing her hand. "We're with you, Isla. All the way." Night began to fall, turning the windows to black mirrors. Isla made her final notes for the day, double-checking every setting, every drip and wire. Rosie breathed quietly, her eyes already closing in exhausted sleep. Arthur, Isla, and Liam stood in the aisle, not speaking, just listening to the rain, to the heartbeats on the monitors, to the pulse of hope that still, somehow, survived inside these old stone walls. And somewhere, deep in the bones of the farm, the fight for the Pendelton legacy was alive and fierce, refusing, even now, to be counted out. The Pendelton farm felt frozen in a tense, fragile hush. After the chaos of Rosie's collapse, no one slept much that night. Isla dozed in a battered lawn chair outside Rosie's stall, medical charts clutched to her chest. Arthur paced the barn like a ghost, boots whispering over straw, his mind replaying every warning Dr. Davies had ever given him about the dangers of twin pregnancies. By morning, word had spread, as it always does in small towns, that trouble had struck at Pendelton Stud. As Isla triple-checked her notes, the familiar sound of Dr. Davies's ancient Land Rover growled up the gravel drive. The veterinarian strode in, eyes sharp, white coat creased and mud-spattered at the hem. He got the full report from Isla in clipped scientific terms. She handed him the latest readings, the printed EKG tapes, her hands steady even as her eyelids fluttered with exhaustion. Dr. Davies nodded as he listened, but his face remained grave. "You bought some time, Isla," he said. "But that's all it is. Time. Rosie's in a delicate balance. If she tips too far in either direction—" "I know," Isla cut in, voice low. "But I'm not giving up. Not yet." Davies turned to Arthur, softening. "Arthur, you and Isla have 24 hours. If things turn, if Rosie crashes again, you'll have to make a call. You can't save everyone." Arthur clenched his fists. He stared past Dr. Davies at Rosie, watching the slow, deep breaths move her sides. The responsibility felt like a stone on his chest. After Dr. Davies left, the air hung heavy with threat. Isla moved through her checks methodically, lips pressed together, refusing to let doubt creep in. Liam, quieter than usual, brought fresh hay and cleaned the buckets, glancing at Isla every few minutes as if checking that she was still breathing. Suddenly, the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the tension. A different sound, heavier and slower than Dr. Davies's old car. A gleaming black Range Rover rolled up to the front gate, pausing only long enough for the driver to survey the yard before rolling to a stop by the old cherry tree. Arthur's back stiffened. He recognized that car, and more importantly, the man who stepped out. Geoffrey Finch, owner of a massive commercial stud operation, always dressed in crisp suits that never seemed to gather a speck of dust. Geoffrey took his time, pulling off dark sunglasses, running a hand through silver hair, a thin smile already curving his lips. He surveyed the battered fencing, the patched roofs, the desperate urgency clinging to the place. "Arthur," he said, voice like oiled metal. "Mind if I come in?" "This isn't a good time, Geoffrey," Arthur replied, standing firm in the barn doorway. Geoffrey's gaze flicked past Arthur, taking in the makeshift hospital, the IV bags, Isla's laptop glowing on a hay bale. Word travels fast, Arthur. People talk. I heard about Rosie's trouble. I wanted to offer my condolences and a bit of friendly advice. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. You know, the market's not what it was. It's a buyer's world now. No shame in letting go before things get messier. Arthur's jaw clenched. I'm not selling, Geoffrey. Geoffrey's lips thinned. That old pride again. I'm not here to fight. I'm just saying, if things get worse, if Rosie doesn't make it, what will you have left? Don't let stubbornness bankrupt you. Isla stepped out then, smudged with dirt and worry, but standing tall. We're not interested in any offers, she said sharply. Geoffrey arched an eyebrow, not missing a beat. You must be Isla. I've read about your work, the prodigy, back to save the family farm. He let the sarcasm hang in the air. You do realize science can't rewrite fate, don't you? Isla met his gaze. Fate's just a word for what people accept. We're not accepting it, not from you. Geoffrey's smile faded, his eyes hardening. He reached into his coat and produced a letter, an official offer, numbers printed crisp and cold across the page. Arthur didn't even look at it. He pushed the letter back. The answer's no, Geoffrey. Geoffrey studied Arthur for a moment, searching for cracks in his resolve. You're gambling with more than your pride, Arthur. Sometimes the smart move is to walk away while you can still stand tall. Arthur squared his shoulders. This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Geoffrey smirked, folding the letter neatly. He turned, pausing only to glance at Isla, his tone suddenly cold. Sometimes hope is just a prettier word for desperation. He slid his sunglasses back on and walked to his car, the Range Rover's engine roaring to life as he drove off, the tension in his wake lingering like a bad smell. Inside the barn, Isla and Arthur stood shoulder to shoulder, silent for a moment. Liam came to stand with them, his eyes flicking from Isla to Arthur, his hands clenched tight. He'll be back, Liam said quietly. Let him come, Arthur replied, his voice steely. He'll find us standing right here. The rest of the day passed in a storm of nerves and waiting. Dr. Davies's warning echoed in every silence. 24 hours. Arthur watched Rosie with a kind of desperate tenderness, whispering encouragement, brushing her neck. Isla checked the monitors, adjusted the IV, marked down readings, her focus absolute. Evening fell like a heavy curtain. The house was silent, but the barn glowed with the faint blue of monitors and the orange of a lamp perched on a barrel. Isla hovered between sleep and wakefulness, her thoughts a jumble of numbers and prayers. Arthur looked at his daughter, saw the exhaustion etched deep, the lines that worry had carved into her young face. He remembered her as a little girl, chasing butterflies across these very fields. Now she was the last line between their legacy and oblivion. You don't have to do this alone, he said quietly. Isla met his eyes, and for a moment her mask slipped, fear, hope, all of it tumbling together. I know, Dad, but I have to try. They sat together, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of Rosie's breathing. Liam stood outside, leaning against the barn wall, keeping watch. Through the windows, the Range Rover's taillights were long gone, swallowed by the dusk. But the words Geoffrey left behind gnawed at the edges of Arthur's resolve. In the darkness, with the old barn holding its breath, the family waited. For news, for change, for the moment when hope would be tested, or shattered. And as the wind rattled the fences, Arthur made a silent promise. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would not surrender. Not to fate, not to greed, not to anyone. The battle for Pendelton had just begun. The night pressed against the barn windows, thick and unyielding, as if the darkness itself wanted to creep inside and settle over everyone's shoulders. In the soft glow of the makeshift stable laboratory, Isla hunched over her laptop, eyes gritty, jaw clenched, fighting the fatigue that pulled at her bones. Charts, printouts, and empty coffee mugs scattered the workbench beside her. Outside Rosie's stall, Arthur paced in measured steps, casting anxious glances at his mare, while Liam busied himself checking water buckets and straightening equipment, though everything was already in perfect order. This was the hardest kind of waiting, the kind that grinds away hope with every tick of the clock. The threat wasn't just Rosie's fragile condition, or even the silent countdown Dr. Davies had left behind. It was the knowledge that they weren't alone in their struggle. Geoffrey Finch's visit, his cold eyes and veiled threats, had left a chill in the air that no heater could banish. The barn was quiet except for the rhythmic blip of monitors and the soft rustle of Rosie shifting on her straw. Isla checked the IV, then gently stroked Rosie's muzzle. "You're doing so good, girl. Hang in there with me." She glanced at the ultrasound monitor, watching the twin heartbeats flicker. The stronger foal's rhythm was steady and bold. The weaker one, though, each beat was a victory won from the edge. A sudden shuffle behind her made Isla turn. Liam approached, holding out a steaming mug of tea, his usual awkwardness softened by concern. "I figured you could use this," he mumbled. Isla accepted the mug, her hands brushing his. "Thanks, Liam." "Really?" He nodded, then hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if checking for Arthur. Isla caught the question in his eyes. "You're still not sure this'll work, are you?" Liam shifted his weight, then spoke in a low voice. "I wasn't at first. I thought maybe you were just desperate. But seeing you now, seeing how you keep fighting, no matter how tired you are, I don't know, Isla. Makes a man want to try harder." Isla managed a weary smile. "We're all in this together. Even Rosie knows it." They both turned as Arthur entered, brushing dust from his hands, face marked with stubborn lines. He watched his daughter and Liam, pride mingling with worry. "How's Rosie holding up?" he asked. Isla checked the monitor again, searching for any sign of decline. "Vitals are stable for now. The weaker twin is still struggling, but no worse than earlier." "I'll run another infusion in an hour." Arthur nodded, then pulled a battered stool next to Isla. He looked at her, truly looked. Past the scientist, past the daughter, to the tired soul fighting an impossible battle. "I used to think grit was all it took," he said, voice gentle. "Hard work, sweat, maybe a little luck. But seeing you here, you and Liam, I'm starting to think maybe grit and brains together is what'll save this place." Isla laughed softly, the sound echoing in the stall. "We'll see, Dad. I hope you're right." The minutes slipped by, measured in heartbeats and the gentle hiss of the IV. Liam, usually so brisk, lingered near Rosie, laying a warm blanket across her flank and speaking in a low, soothing voice. He fetched towels, took Isla's instructions without complaint, and even refilled Arthur's thermos with fresh coffee from the house. Sometime near dawn, the barn shifted. A tension seemed to break. Not gone, but softened, replaced with a sense of fragile camaraderie. The three of them sat in a triangle of lamplight, sharing quiet conversation and silent prayers. Then, as the sky outside turned a pale gray, A sharp electronic chirp erupted from the ultrasound machine. Isla jerked upright, eyes scanning the screen. Rosie flinched, her head tossing in distress. Arthur was at her side in an instant. "What's happening?" Isla stared at the monitor, breath catching. The stronger heartbeat was steady, but the weaker one had dipped dangerously, its rhythm faint. "Liam, get Dr. Davies, now!" Isla snapped. Liam bolted, phone already in hand, barking urgent words into the receiver. Arthur held Rosie's halter, whispering encouragement, while Isla worked fast, adjusting the IV, applying a new nutrient solution, watching as the weak signal flickered on the screen. "Hang on," she murmured. "Please, just a little longer." Minutes dragged by. The monitor beeped and stuttered, the whole world shrinking to that tiny, pulsing line. Then, as if by sheer will, the heartbeat steadied, climbing back from the brink. Arthur slumped against the stall wall, trembling. Isla exhaled, blinking back tears. Liam returned, breathless. "Davies is on his way," he said. "Should be here in 10. Isla nodded, brushing sweat from her forehead. "Thank you, Liam. We'll hold on." Dawn finally bled across the fields, gold spilling over the hedgerows. As the first rays touched the barn, Rosie's breathing evened out, her body relaxing at last. Isla checked the ultrasound. Both heartbeats present, one strong, one faint, but fighting. Dr. Davies arrived, still buttoning his coat, his face etched with concern. He examined Rosie, scrolled through Isla's charts, then finally offered a grim nod. "She's made it through the night," he said. "That's more than I hoped for. But there's something you need to see." He pointed to the ultrasound, highlighting a blurry shape. "The weaker foal isn't developing as it should," he explained. "You've saved Rosie, and likely one foal. But this one, its odds are very low." Isla swallowed, staring at the dim outline. Her voice was a whisper. "There's still a chance, right?" Davies didn't answer, only rested a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes, the bravest thing is accepting what we can't control." Isla blinked back tears, jaw set. "I understand, Doctor. But I won't give up. Not yet." Arthur put an arm around her, pulling her close. Liam lingered in the doorway, his face unreadable but his eyes shining with hard-earned respect. "You've done more than anyone could, Isla," Arthur said quietly. As the morning brightened, hope and heartache mixed in the Pendelton barn. They had saved Rosie, a miracle in itself. But the fight for both new lives was far from over. The day began with the bittersweet promise of survival and the haunting question: how do you save a life that's barely begun? They would find out together, as a family, as a team, as the stubborn last defenders of a legacy too precious to surrender. A low gray dawn crept across the Cotswold hills, the Pendelton Stud barn glowing with the quiet light of determination. Night had not granted them rest, but as the first birds called and the last stars faded, Isla found herself moving with renewed purpose. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It belonged to all of them now. Even the ancient barn, battered and patched, seemed to brace itself for what was coming. Rosie's labored breaths echoed against the stone walls, her great body shuddering with the first true contractions. The monitors, the IV lines, the scent of antiseptic and hay, all blended into a kind of urgent symphony. Isla wiped her hands on her jeans, rechecked her notes, and felt the pounding of her own heart in her throat. Arthur appeared at her side, face drawn and pale. "Is it starting?" he asked. Isla nodded. "She's in labor, Dad. It's early, but there's no stopping it now." Liam entered, a determined set to his jaw. He carried a stack of clean towels, a bucket of warm water, and the quiet steadiness of someone who had chosen his side. He nodded at Isla. "Just tell me what you need. I'll handle it." Dr. Davies, summoned hours before, arrived in a rush, pulling on his gloves as he strode into the barn. He took in the scene at a glance, exchanging a look with Isla. "We stick to the plan, Isla," he said. "No improvising unless it's life or death." "Agreed?" "Agreed," Isla replied, though her hands shook just a little. They moved like a true team. Arthur checked supplies, his years of experience a silent anchor for the others. Dr. Davies called out instructions, voice steady. Isla, eyes blazing with focus, worked at Rosie's side, monitoring both mare and unborn foals, double-checking every reading, every drip. Liam, quick and quiet, passed instruments, fetched hot water, and kept Rosie calm with gentle murmurs. He was everywhere at once, his skepticism replaced by fierce loyalty. The contractions hit hard and fast. Rosie's strength was flagging, sweat darkening her coat. Isla adjusted the IV flow, monitoring the ultrasound as Dr. Davies worked. The first foal, the strong one, was in position, fighting its way into the world. "Now, Isla," Dr. Davies called, as Rosie gave a desperate push. Isla moved in, guiding the foal's shoulders free with gloved hands. The air was thick with tension. Arthur's jaw clenched so tight he thought it might crack. Rosie let out a groan, and then the foal slipped into Isla's arms, wet and shivering. "He's breathing," Isla cried, and the monitor confirmed it, a strong, steady heartbeat pulsing on the screen. Arthur laughed, a sound half sob, half relief. Dr. Davies took the foal, checking its airway and rubbing its sides to coax breath into its tiny lungs. They named him Artie, after Arthur, a symbol of stubborn hope, squirming and alive against impossible odds. But there was no time to rest. The second foal was not moving well, its heartbeat fluttering on the screen. Isla's confidence wavered for a split second, her fear twisting into the corners of her mind. "We're losing the second one." "She's in distress," Isla breathed. Dr. Davies shot her a sharp look. "Decision time, Isla. Do we risk everything for the weak one?" Arthur stepped forward, voice low. "She's my last chance, Doctor. Both of them are." Isla locked eyes with Liam, her own resolve mirrored in his. "Let's do it," she said, her voice steely. Together they repositioned Rosie, working in tight, silent coordination. Isla's hands moved with care, guiding the tiny, limp foal into the world. The room held its breath. For a terrifying moment, there was only silence. Then the foal shuddered, gasping for air, the tiniest, frailest cry echoing in the barn. "She's alive," Liam said, his voice cracking. Isla wiped her eyes, quickly checking the heartbeat, faint, fluttering, but there. "Her name's Hope," Isla whispered. "She's tiny, but she's a fighter." Arthur knelt beside the foals, his eyes shining. "We did it. You all did it." Liam was already at work, gently massaging Hope's chest, warming her with a towel. Dr. Davies placed an oxygen mask over the filly's nose, monitoring her breathing. "You've got a miracle here, Isla," the vet said, pride softening his features. "But now the real work begins. She'll need round-the-clock care if she's going to survive." "I'll do it," Isla replied. "I'll do whatever it takes." Arthur clapped Liam on the shoulder. "Son, you're family now, whether you like it or not." Liam grinned, a little sheepish, but proud. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. The barn hummed with quiet victory. Artie wobbled on unsteady legs, already nosing at Rosie's flank. Hope lay bundled in towels, every breath a new triumph. Rosie, exhausted, stretched her neck to nuzzle both her foals, eyes soft with relief. They worked through the morning, a team forged in crisis. Isla logged every vital sign, adjusting Hope's oxygen, feeding her through a tiny tube. Liam cleaned up, fetched food, and never let either foal out of his sight. Arthur called in favors, arranged extra bedding, and kept the farm running, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For a few precious hours, it felt like the world had cracked open, letting in light after a long, hard storm. But no one dared relax. Every member of the team, Isla, Arthur, Liam, Dr. Davies, understood that survival was only the first step. Late that night, with the barn quiet and the foals sleeping, Isla found herself outside under a sky alive with stars. Liam joined her, hands in his pockets. "I never thought I'd see a day like this," he admitted. "You didn't just save them, Isla. You saved us, too." Isla looked at him, hope and exhaustion mingling in her eyes. "We saved each other, Liam. That's what a real team does." Arthur, standing by the barn door, listened to their voices fade into the night. He looked back at the old stable, at Rosie and her foals, at the future, trembling but real. For the first time in too long, he believed in tomorrow. Inside, hope stirred, her tiny heart beating with quiet, relentless strength. And outside, as the wind danced through the fields, the name Pendelton meant something again, not just to the world, but to the people who fought for it. Together. Daylight had finally settled over Pendelton Stud, but inside the barn, time moved to a different rhythm, measured in heartbeats, syringe feeds, and whispered encouragement. The world outside spun on, indifferent to the desperate ballet unfolding between ancient stone walls and flickering monitors. For Arthur, Isla, Liam, and even Dr. Davies, the next hours and days would become a blur of effort, doubt, and stubborn resolve. Hope, the fragile filly, became the axis around which everything turned. Isla set up a cot in the tack room, refusing to leave for more than a few minutes. She learned the signs of trouble before any alarm sounded, her senses tuned to every twitch of Hope's ears, every flutter of her tiny chest. Liam seemed to exist everywhere at once, warming milk, adjusting heat lamps, logging every feeding and medication with neat, careful notes. Even Arthur, who had never before written anything more complicated than a check or a ration list, started keeping his own record. Times Hope stood, times she nursed. The number of steps she managed before her legs buckled. Every night bled into morning. The team took shifts, napping in turns, nerves strung tight as violin strings. Isla grew sharper with every setback, more methodical, letting her worry fuel her attention to detail. Liam's rough hands, once good only for mucking stalls, became steady and gentle. His faith in Isla so complete, he rarely questioned her orders now. Arthur, who had once scoffed at the value of data and science, found himself poring over Isla's charts in the lamplight, heart pounding at every blip or dip in Hope's vital signs. But it wasn't just vigilance that kept them going. It was the little victories. The first time Hope took a bottle without coaxing, Isla laughed so hard she nearly dropped the feeding tube. The day Hope stood on trembling legs for a full minute, Arthur wept quietly, hidden by Rosie's stall door. When Hope took her first faltering steps, Liam whooped so loud he startled the barn cats, then blushed as Isla hugged him, tears of joy smudging the grime on her face. Outside the barn, the rest of the world started to notice. Neighbors brought casseroles and warm bread, leaving them on the porch with scribbled notes. "Don't give up," and "For Hope." Local farmers stopped by with advice, stories of their own brushes with disaster, and sometimes hope that had paid off. But word also reached those who would use it for their own ends. Geoffrey Finch, ever the opportunist, sent a sleek envelope by courier, another friendly offer, this one higher than before but still laced with condescension. Arthur didn't even open it. He burned it in the old wood stove, watching the paper curl and blacken. Each dawn, the team gathered for a quick conference, reviewing Isla's charts and Dr. Davies's notes. There were moments when the tension nearly broke them. One rainy afternoon, Hope's breathing faltered. Isla barked orders while Liam rushed for the oxygen, and Arthur cradled Hope's head as if willing life into her by sheer force of will. Dr. Davies arrived at a run, coat flapping, eyes grim, but within an hour Hope was stable again, her fragile will refusing to surrender. Afterward, Isla slumped in the hay, hands shaking, voice raw. What if I'm doing something wrong? What if I miss something, and we lose her? Arthur knelt beside her, voice steady as the hills. You're not alone, Isla. None of us are. We fight together, or not at all. Liam sat down on Isla's other side, handing her a mug of tea. I'd follow you into any fight, Doc, and so would Hope. Look at her. She's tougher than all of us. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet understanding. It wasn't just Hope who was fighting. It was all of them. They drew strength from each other, patched their cracks with shared laughter, quiet words, and the certainty that whatever happened next, they wouldn't face it alone. Rosie, recovering faster than anyone expected, became an emblem of the new order. She watched her foals with regal patience, nuzzling Hope after every feeding, standing guard through the long nights. Sometimes Arthur sat with her, talking quietly, confessing worries he wouldn't share with anyone else. The barn itself transformed too. Where there had once been only dust and cobwebs, now there was light. Electric cords strung overhead, new feed bins, and even a small refrigerator for Hope's medicines. Isla's lab notes, Liam's feeding schedules, and Arthur's careful observations covered the tack room wall, a living record of their battle. Dr. Davies, who had started as an outsider, now stopped by daily. He came to check on Hope, yes, but also to marvel at the way the team had found its rhythm. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted one morning as Hope dozed under a heat lamp. I thought you'd lose her, but you didn't. You gave her a reason to stay. That evening, after a rare shared supper, Arthur raised his mug. To Hope, and to all of you, this place, this family, it's got a fighting chance because we did it together. The others joined him, laughter and relief brightening the barn's shadows. But even as joy found its way back to Pendelton Stud, Isla couldn't ignore the worry prickling in the back of her mind. Hope was growing stronger, yes, but there were still risks. Disease, infection, the unpredictable whim of nature. Every hour, Isla checked the local veterinary bulletins, her anxiety only eased by the sight of Hope resting beside Artie, Rosie hovering like a guardian. Late that night, Isla and Liam took the last watch. Liam leaned against the stall, watching the foals. You ever wonder what comes next? He asked quietly. All the time, Isla replied, a small smile on her lips. But I've learned you can't plan everything. Sometimes you just have to trust. The work, the people beside you, even the odds. Liam nodded, gaze soft. You saved this place, Isla, and you saved me too. I didn't think I had anything left to give until you asked for help. Isla looked at him, warmth rising in her chest. I couldn't have done any of it alone. They stood in silence, listening to the night, the barn alive with the gentle sounds of horses breathing, the rhythmic pulse of life fought for and won, at least for now. And as dawn crept back over the fields, Pendelton Stud stood whole again, not because of luck, but because ordinary people refused to give up on each other and on hope. Word spread faster than spring wind through the valleys of the Cotswolds. The story of Pendelton Stud's miracle foals, of Artie's sturdy spirit and Hope's impossible survival, rippled across the countryside, outpacing the crows that traced the hedgerows at dawn. What started as local whispers became something bigger. Reporters called, neighbors brought their children to peer between the fence posts, and the phone in the old farmhouse rang off the hook. Isla found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant hero. At first, the attention felt like sunlight after a long winter. TV crews asked for interviews, their cameras blinking like curious eyes as Isla explained Hope's story. The local news anchor called it a miracle of science and heart. Photos of Hope and Artie, knobby-kneed and blinking under Rosie's careful gaze, appeared in the town paper, and Isla's phone buzzed with messages from old friends, university professors, even strangers from other towns. For a moment, the old place sparkled with pride. Arthur took calls from breeders who'd once shunned him, their voices warmer now, curious about the filly who refused to die. Liam grinned every time someone recognized him at the market. Dr. Davies, his reputation burnished by association, finally smiled when he came to visit, his steps lighter in the barn. But beneath the surface, Isla felt the strain. The attention brought fresh anxiety, as if their story now belonged to everyone else, as if a single mistake would be watched, measured, and judged by the world outside. Each morning, Isla sat at her laptop, answering interview requests and science questions from magazines in London, all while keeping one eye on the stable cameras. On a bright Thursday, the local television crew arrived, cables and microphones snaking through the mud. Isla set up in the barn, flanked by Artie and a sleepy Hope, Rosie hovering nearby. She answered questions about genetics, about persistence, about the bond between humans and animals. She spoke softly but firmly, her words careful and precise. Hope was a lesson, she said, her gaze never leaving the foals. Sometimes science gives you a chance, but it's people and teamwork and belief that see it through. When the cameras shut off, the reporter shook Isla's hand, admiration plain on his face. The producer, a woman with sharp eyes and a quick smile, offered Isla her card. If you ever want to tell this story to the world, you let me know. It's a tale people need right now. As the crew packed up, Arthur stood outside the barn, looking prouder than Isla had seen him in years. He clapped Isla on the back, his eyes shining. You did good, kid. You made us more than a footnote. You made us a headline. Liam joined them, fresh from mucking stalls, grinning at the chaos. Who would have thought, huh? Pendelton Stud, famous at last. For the rest of the day, the barn hummed with energy. Liam fielded questions from curious children. Arthur led a tour for the mare, and Isla managed a quick interview via video call with a journalist from the States. All the while, Dr. Davies checked on Hope, his manner brisk but proud, offering only minor corrections to Isla's medical explanations. But fame, Isla soon realized, was a double-edged sword. The more attention they received, the more exposed they felt. Geoffrey Finch, watching from the glossy glass of his office, clipped every article, his eyes cold as he read Isla's words. The commercial stud owner made no effort to hide his disdain, calling up Arthur under the pretense of congratulations, only to remind him of how quickly fortunes can turn. "Don't let it get to you," Arthur said that evening, noticing Isla's tension as she locked up the barn. "Let them watch. We're stronger than we look." But Isla felt the weight of every eye, every expectation. That night, she sat by Hope's stall, staring at the computer screen, reviewing charts, searching for anything she might have missed. As if in answer to her anxiety, Dr. Davies's phone rang just after midnight. Isla, drifting near sleep, heard his low voice outside, then saw his silhouette hurry back into the barn, face grim. "There's news," he said quietly, not wanting to wake the foals. "An outbreak of equine influenza up north. Cases are spreading fast, faster than we expected." Isla's breath caught. "Here." "Not yet," Davies replied. "But the wind's blowing this way. We'll need stricter protocols. No visitors, no outside deliveries, nothing in or out unless it's necessary." Arthur, who had joined them, set his jaw. "I'll get on it. No one gets near the horses unless they're scrubbed top to bottom." Liam nodded, his cheerful demeanor replaced by a soldier's focus. "I'll disinfect every inch. We've come too far to let a bug take us down." The barn, which had become a beacon of joy, was suddenly a fortress under siege. Isla sent messages to every reporter, canceling all further interviews. She posted a sign at the gate. "Biosecurity protocols in effect. No visitors, no exceptions." Word traveled through the community again, this time anxious and tight. Some neighbors grumbled, but most understood. The vet clinics issued warnings, and everyone who'd once brought casseroles and congratulations now dropped off supplies at the end of the drive, waving from a safe distance. Inside Pendelton Stud, life shrank back to its essentials. Isla and Liam worked in shifts, scrubbing every surface, washing boots, checking Hope and Artie's temperatures every hour. Arthur set up a disinfectant station at the door, his old farmer's hands turning meticulous as he watched over his legacy. The tension was a living thing, settling in the rafters. Each cough, each snort, each twitch of a horse's ear sent a ripple of dread through the barn. Even Hope, who had survived so much, seemed subdued, sensing the worry in the air. Still, they pressed on. Hope took her feedings. Artie romped in the paddock when allowed. Rosie grazed contentedly under Isla's watchful gaze. Night after night, Isla and Liam double-checked every latch, every water bucket, every chart. One evening, as Isla finished a final round of checks, she found Liam in the barn aisle, staring out into the darkness. He didn't turn when she approached. "Scared?" she asked, leaning against the wall beside him. "Only of failing," Liam said, voice quiet. "I've seen what a sickness like this can do. It's ugly, Isla, but if anyone can keep them safe, it's you." Isla put a hand on his arm. "It's us, Liam. We do it together, remember?" He smiled, a flash of warmth breaking through the worry. Wouldn't have it any other way. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, Pendelton Stud stood strong, braced against the threat at its door. Isla checked Hope one last time, feeling the pulse of life, delicate, stubborn, and shining with everything they'd built. The world was watching, yes, but inside those old stone walls, they watched out for each other. And as long as they did, Isla believed, Hope would live on, no matter what storm swept over the hills. Pendelton Stud had always felt like an island in the green heart of the Cotswolds, but with the threat of equine influenza drawing ever closer, it became something more, a fortress. Isla could feel it in every detail, the way the barn doors stayed locked, the rows of disinfectant buckets by every entrance, the handwritten signs warning, "No visitors, biosecurity in effect. Even the air seemed different, thicker, charged with worry and fierce resolve. Inside, life was pared down to the absolute essentials. No outsiders crossed the threshold. Deliveries were left by the old cattle grid, and even Arthur, who had once welcomed neighbors with open arms, now checked each box with gloved hands and a wary eye. Isla set up a detailed logbook for every person, animal, and item entering or leaving the property. Her signature at the bottom of each page a silent pledge. Nothing and no one would bring sickness into their home. Every day began the same. Liam, now the most vigilant of the bunch, arrived at dawn in coveralls, carrying a spray bottle and a clipboard. He disinfected every surface, checking the barn aisles, the stalls, the paddock gates. Isla checked Hope and Artie's temperatures, logging every reading, watching for the tiniest sign of fever or fatigue. Arthur became the gatekeeper, his familiar face now stern as he enforced every new rule. No exceptions, no leniency. He even refused a visit from the mare, a man he'd known for 40 years, sending him away with a nod and a wordless apology. "We're not just protecting our horses," Isla explained when she caught Arthur staring sadly at the empty driveway. "We're protecting the whole valley. If this virus gets in, it'll burn through every farm for miles." Arthur nodded, his pride in Isla plain, even as worry lined his face. "She's right," he said, to no one in particular. "We hold the line, for them, for everyone." The days were long and heavy with routine, each one a battle fought in silence. Liam found himself transformed, the skeptical farmhand, now the most zealous enforcer of the new order. He barked reminders about hand-washing, about dipping boots, about wearing gloves even to check the mail. One afternoon, when a delivery driver tried to skip the disinfectant station, Liam's voice rang out, sharp as a whip. "Don't even think about it. You want to step inside? You scrub like everyone else." Isla, who overheard, smiled to herself. Liam's change wasn't just about fear, it was about love. Love for the Foals, for Rosie, for a place that had given him purpose when he'd needed it most. The barn itself took on the feel of a barracks. The protective suits they wore became their armor. Isla even nicknamed the group the Garrison, and they took it in stride, laughing together as they suited up, tension easing for a moment as humor crept in. But the threat was never far. Every time Hope coughed, Isla's heart stopped. Every time Artie lay too long in the straw, Arthur hovered until the colt finally got up, stretching and shaking out his legs. Dr. Davies called in daily, sharing news of the outbreak's progress. 3 new cases in the next town over, then 5, then a cluster on the far side of the county. "We have to be perfect," Isla reminded them after one grim update. "No shortcuts, no mistakes." They responded with nods and renewed focus. For once, no one argued, not even Arthur. Yet even as pressure mounted, there were moments of unexpected grace. Hope, ever the battler, grew stronger by the day. Her coat lost its sickly sheen, her legs grew steadier, her appetite fierce and joyful. She followed Isla everywhere, nuzzling her pockets for treats. Artie, bigger and more boisterous, became her shadow, the 2 foals bounding across the small paddock when weather allowed. Liam rigged a makeshift obstacle course for them. Old barrels, hay bales, cones. The sight of Hope leaping clumsily over her first barrel sent Arthur into a fit of laughter so pure and unexpected, it echoed out across the fields. The Garrison celebrated every small victory. A normal temperature, a full night's sleep, a morning without coughing. Arthur grilled sausages outside, the smoky scent drifting into the barn, and for an hour they let themselves believe everything would be all right. But reality always crept back in. Isla woke often in the night, gripped by dreams of fevers and empty stalls. She double-checked every reading, cleaned her equipment until her hands cracked, and kept her phone close, waiting for updates from Dr. Davies. One evening, as rain battered the barn roof, Arthur found Isla at her desk, hunched over a page of calculations. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Not really," Isla replied, rubbing her eyes. "I keep thinking, did I miss something? Is there more I could do?" Arthur put a hand over hers. "You've done more than anyone could, Isla. You've given this place, all of us, a second chance." Isla squeezed his hand, blinking away tears. I can't let anything happen to them. Not after all we've fought for." Arthur nodded, his voice quiet. "Then we keep fighting, as long as it takes." Suddenly, Liam burst in, breathless. He held up his phone, face lit with relief. "Dr. Davies says the quarantine's working. The new cases are slowing. We might just have beaten this thing." A wave of relief swept through the barn. Isla slumped in her chair, tears welling up for the first time in days. Arthur let out a shaky laugh, clapping Liam on the back. But even as they celebrated, Isla knew the war wasn't truly over. There would always be threats. Illness, weather, the slow rot of time. But tonight, they had held their fortress, protected their family, and given Hope, both the filly and the feeling, a fighting chance. Late that night, as the rain eased and the clouds parted, Isla slipped outside. She watched Artie and Hope sleep side by side, Rosie standing guard, the barn bathed in soft lamplight. Liam joined her, leaning on the fence. "We did it," he whispered. "No," Isla said. "We're doing it. Together." Above them, the stars shimmered, scattered like diamonds over the dark fields. The garrison stood strong, the last defenders of Pendelton, ready for whatever battle tomorrow might bring. The first hints of spring brushed the Cotswold hills, bringing a gentle warmth that seeped through the old stones of Pendelton Stud and banished the last chill of winter from its fields. For the first time in months, Arthur found himself standing in the morning light, listening to the birdsong rather than the anxious beep of medical monitors. Hope and Artie romped in the dew-damp paddock, their coats shining, every kick and nuzzle a testament to the months of fear and faith that had shaped their first fragile weeks. Peace, when it finally arrived, didn't fall like a thunderclap. It crept in quietly, one soft morning at a time. Quarantine protocols loosened as the news from Dr. Davies grew brighter each day. The influenza threat faded, leaving behind a new respect for boundaries and a gratitude that ran deeper than words. Inside the barn, life settled into a new rhythm. Isla traded her biohazard suits for old jeans and a faded sweater, her hands still quick, but now more relaxed as she checked Hope's legs, listened to Rosie's breathing, and updated her files. Her old notebooks, filled with scribbled charts and midnight worries, now lived on a shelf above her new desk, right beside a bright blue binder labeled Hope's Miracle Pendelton Protocols. She started a blog, not out of vanity, but to help other small breeders who might face what she had faced. Her inbox quickly filled with questions, thanks, and stories from all over England, and even beyond. Liam, once the skeptical outsider, found his place at last. He became the de facto manager of the stables, trusted with every task from morning feedings to field rotations. Under his care, the barns never looked cleaner, the hay never sweeter, and the horses, everyone, never more content. Where before he'd hesitated, now he moved with certainty, his voice carrying authority and humor alike as he trained a new farmhand, patiently explaining Isla's protocols and the little things you only learn by living them. Arthur, finally, breathed easy. He no longer awoke in dread, haunted by debts and the ghosts of old failures. Instead, he found joy in the simple things, leading Rosie and the foals out to pasture at sunrise, running his hands over the new fencing Liam had helped him build, watching Isla laugh with a visiting vet student. His pride in his daughter and his team was as fierce as ever, but now it was tempered with the knowledge that his legacy was not a burden. It was a living thing, growing stronger by the day. It wasn't long before opportunity knocked, not in the form of Geoffrey Finch, who had quietly faded from view, but from the Royal Veterinary College itself. A letter arrived for Isla, offering collaboration and support to study the methods she'd pioneered. Arthur watched her open it at the kitchen table, a mug of tea in her hands. She grinned, passed the letter to him, and said, "This one's for you too, Dad." Arthur didn't need to read the words to understand. He folded the letter and slid it back to Isla. "It's your world now, kid. I'm just glad I got to see you build it." Together they celebrated in the only way that felt right, by opening the paddocks and letting Artie and Hope run free. No fences, no boundaries, except the wild green fields and the clear blue sky. The two foals, once clinging to life, now chased each other in wide, galloping circles, Rosie trotting behind, her head high and proud. That afternoon, Pendelton Stud hosted its first open house since the crisis. Visitors arrived, neighboring breeders, old friends, a few city journalists with notepads in hand. Isla gave a tour, explaining her protocols and the story behind Hope's survival, her voice steady, never boastful. Liam demonstrated the new systems, cracking jokes and winning laughs. Arthur, dressed in his Sunday best, greeted each guest with a firm handshake and a smile that reached his eyes. There was even a brief, unexpected moment when Arthur and Geoffrey Finch crossed paths at a spring horse auction. Geoffrey, reduced to polite small talk, offered a curt nod, acknowledgement without triumph or malice. Arthur simply smiled, his confidence unshakable. The sense of renewal reached every corner of the farm. That evening, as the last visitors departed and twilight settled in, Isla sat beneath the old oak at the edge of the paddock. Liam joined her, bringing 2 mugs of tea. They watched the foals as the sky faded from gold to blue to velvet black. "Hard to believe," Liam murmured, "that we're on the other side of all that." Isla nodded, her gaze following Hope as the filly chased fireflies. "It almost doesn't feel real. But I guess that's the thing about miracles. You fight for them every single day, until suddenly they're just part of your life." He nudged her, gentle. "So what's next, Doctor?" She laughed, shaking her head. "More work, I suppose. More stories to help write. Maybe even a few new dreams." Liam looked at her, his smile lingering. "Whatever it is, I'm in." Nearby, Arthur leaned on the fence, arms folded, watching his legacy, living, breathing, running wild and free under the moon. The lessons of the hard winter lingered, not as scars, but as a reminder. The real inheritance of Pendelton Stud wasn't land or bloodlines. It was the stubborn courage to adapt, the wisdom to trust others, and the humility to reach beyond tradition when the old ways failed. In the end, the story that had begun with rot and despair became one of hope and transformation. The farm's future, once so uncertain, now shimmered with possibility. As the stars brightened overhead, Isla stood, brushed off her jeans, and called to the foals. Artie and Hope galloped toward her, full of life, their bodies strong and sleek in the starlight. Rosie followed, her shadow long on the grass. Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the laughter of his daughter and the gentle thrum of hooves. He felt the old anxieties slip away, replaced by something new, peace and a quiet, unbreakable pride. And so the Pendelton story continued, rewritten every day by those who refused to let it end. Their victory was not in a headline or a single moment, but in every breath, every step, every lesson passed on to the next generation. That night, as the family and their team gathered for one last cup of tea under the stars, Isla raised her mug and spoke quietly. To hope, to second chances, and to the future we build. Together. The others echoed her, their voices mingling with the wind. And somewhere in the darkness, hope whinnied, wild and free, a living promise that the best legacies are written not by fate, but by the hands and hearts that dare to dream again.